Ladies and gentlemen, today I invite you to relax, to breathe, and to remember something very simple, yet very profound. For too long you have been searching, running after meaning, chasing answers, trying to find yourself as if you were a traveler who somehow wandered away from your own being. But the truth is astonishingly beautiful. You were never lost. You have only forgotten to look within. This moment, right now, is enough. This silence between my words is enough. Because in that silence, you can see the absurdity of the search and the magnificence of the one who is searching. So let us begin this journey, not to discover something new, but to rediscover what has always been present, waiting patiently inside you. To stop seeking and start witnessing is to shift the entire axis of your inner world. Seeking is restless. It is built on the belief that something essential is missing from your life, from your identity, from your very being. When you seek, you move outward, driven by a subtle fear that without effort, without pursuit, without struggle, you will never arrive at what you long for. Yet the irony is that the very act of seeking creates the distance between you and the truth that is already present. It is like a man searching with a lamp in broad daylight, unaware that the sun is shining above him. The seeking becomes the barrier. Witnessing, on the other hand, is an invitation to simply see, to see what is, without judgment, without interpretation, without the need to improve or shape it in any particular way. Witnessing is not passive, it is profoundly alive. When you witness, you are not escaping life, you are entering it fully, without filters. It is the purest form of presence. It is awareness without effort, clarity without struggle, and understanding without the noise of the mind pushing and pulling you in every direction. When you stop seeking, something extraordinary happens. The inner tension begins to dissolve. Seeking is always tense because it carries an expectation of an outcome. It projects a future moment where fulfillment supposedly exists. But that future never comes because the seeker remains the same, carrying the same dissatisfaction, the same longing, the same belief that there must be more. Witnessing frees you from this loop because witnessing is rooted in the present. It does not chase, it does not demand. It simply observes. Imagine sitting silently by a river. The seeker will watch the water and wonder where it is going, how fast it flows, what lies beyond the bend, what it might reveal if only they follow it far enough. Their mind is consumption, comparison, anticipation. They may even miss the river entirely because they are lost in their thoughts about it. The witness sits by the same river and experiences its flow without trying to possess or decode it. They notice the shimmering light on the surface, the subtle sound of movement, the sense of life passing and yet continuously present. The witness becomes one with the moment because they are not trying to extract meaning from it. They are simply available to it. Seeking comes from the mind, witnessing comes from awareness. The mind is always hungry, always searching for something to add, something to fix, something to remove. Awareness is complete. Does not need to accumulate anything. When you witness your thoughts instead of following them, you begin to see how much unnecessary movement the mind creates. You see how worry, ambition, fear, and desire arise and fade like clouds drifting across the sky. You understand that you are not those thoughts, you are the sky itself, vast and untouched. In witnessing, identity shifts from the noise to the silence behind the noise. Stopping the search does not mean abandoning growth or becoming indifferent. It means discovering that real growth happens through understanding, not through frantic effort. When you simply watch your emotions, instead of trying to change them, they transform naturally. When you observe your patterns without condemning them, they lose their grip on you. When you stay present with your inner world, clarity emerges on its own. The witness is not a doer, the witness is a presence. And in that presence, things unfold naturally without force. To witness is to experience the beauty of being without the weight of becoming. Seeking traps you in a future that never arrives. Witnessing anchors you in the richness of this moment. Seeking keeps you chasing shadows. Witnessing reveals the light from which those shadows arise. Seeking exhausts you because it is fueled by the illusion that you are incomplete. Witnessing rejuvenates you because it shows you moment by moment that nothing essential is lacking. The moment you turn inward and begin to witness, even for a few seconds as space opens, it feels like breathing for the first time without obstruction. It feels like returning to a place you've always known, but somehow forgot. In witnessing, you are no longer trying to be someone. You simply are. And in that simple being, there is peace, clarity, and a quiet joy that does not depend on achievement or pursuit. The search loses its urgency because you realize the truth was never hiding. It was only waiting for you to stop running long enough to notice it. To say that you are not missing but misidentified is to recognize that the struggle you feel within yourself is not a lack of something but a misunderstanding of who you truly are. Most people move through life carrying identities that were handed to them by others: parents, society, culture, expectations, fears, and comparisons. These identities accumulate like layers of clothing, so many layers that eventually the original body beneath is forgotten. When you feel lost, it is not because your true self has disappeared. It is because it has been covered by labels, roles, and stories that were never yours to begin with. Misidentification happens subtly. From childhood, you are taught what you should be, how you should behave, what dreams you should pursue, what success looks like, what failure means, what emotions are acceptable, what parts of you must be hidden. With every should, a piece of your natural being is replaced by a fabricated image. Slowly, the authentic self gets buried under an identity constructed out of social conditioning, fear of judgment, and the endless need for approval. You begin to mistake the mask for the face, the performance for the person, the role for the reality. This is why so many people feel an inexplicable emptiness even when they achieve what they were told would make them fulfilled. The emptiness comes from living as someone you are not. It comes from aligning your life with the expectations of others instead of the truth of your own being. You are not missing anything, you are misaligned with yourself. The longing you feel is not for something outside of you, it is for a return to your own essence. Misidentification also arises from the mind's habit of clinging to labels. You say, I am this, I am that, I am successful, I am a failure, I am strong, I am weak, I am loved, I am unwanted. These labels become prisons. They reduce the vastness of your consciousness into narrow definitions. But who you are is not a word, not a title, not a personality type, not a story. You are the awareness that sees all these things. When you misidentify with the temporary, your emotions, your thoughts, your experiences, you forget the one who is witnessing them. You begin to believe that the changing waves are your essence, instead of recognizing that you are the ocean in which they arise. The tension of life often comes from defending these false identities. You try to maintain an image, prove your worth, hide your flaws, and protect the fragile sense of self you have constructed. Every criticism feels like an attack on your very existence, not because it truly is, but because you have mistaken the costume for your core. When you are misidentified, you become dependent on external validation. You look to others to tell you who you are, and in doing so, you hand over your power. The real you becomes obscured behind layers of borrowed definitions. But when you begin to see that the you have been trying to perfect or protect is not your real identity, a profound freedom begins to emerge. You recognize that emotions come and go but do not define you. Thoughts arise and dissolve, yet you remain. Circumstances change, roles shift, successes appear and fade, but something in you is constant. That constant presence is your true self, quiet, spacious, unchanging. It does not need validation, improvement, or defense. It simply is. To realize that you are misidentified is not a failure, it is the beginning of awakening. It means you are starting to see the difference between what you have been taught to believe about yourself and what you actually are. And this realization is not an intellectual conclusion. It is a subtle inner shift. It is the moment you recognize that the anxiety, the pressure, the confusion were never signs of your inadequacy. They were signs that you were living through a false identity that was too small for your true nature. When you sit quietly and observe yourself without judgment, you may discover how much of your life has been shaped by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of being different. These fears keep the false identities alive, but awareness dissolves them. When you witness your fears, you see that they are not you. When you witness your thoughts, you see that they are not you. When you witness even your most deeply held beliefs, you begin to sense the presence of something deeper, something more real than any belief could ever define. You are not missing, you have never been missing. You are only hidden beneath layers that you no longer need. The journey is not about searching for a new identity, but shedding the false ones. It is not about becoming someone else, but recognizing the one you have always been beneath the noise and the narratives. To be misidentified is to be asleep. To see through the misidentification is to begin to wake up. The idea that the search ends when the seeker is seen is one of the most subtle and transformative truths you can encounter. Most of life's struggles, confusions, and restless movements come from an unconscious identification with the seeker, the part of you that believes something is missing and must be found somewhere else. This seeker is constantly looking outward, constantly chasing experiences, constantly longing for a moment when everything will finally make sense. But the seeker is not a fixed entity. It is a psychological construct, a habit of the mind. When you become aware of this seeker, when you see it clearly, the entire momentum of the search begins to dissolve on its own. The seeker survives only as long as it goes unnoticed. It whispers that fulfillment is ahead, somewhere in the future, somewhere in achievement, recognition, enlightenment, or perfection. It convinces you that life is incomplete as it is, that you must keep moving, striving, bettering, and proving yourself. What the seeker never tells you is that its hunger can never be satisfied because it feeds on the very sense of incompleteness it creates. The more you chase, the more you feel the need to chase. It is a cycle built on illusion. The moment you turn your attention toward the seeker itself, you expose this illusion. You begin to see that what you took as your true identity was only a movement of the mind. Seeing the seeker is not an intellectual act. It is a moment of pure awareness when you suddenly notice the one inside you who is always searching. It might appear as a subtle tension, a constant leaning forward, a belief that the next moment holds more value than the present one. You may sense it in the way your mind drifts toward the future, imagining scenarios where you will finally feel whole, or you may feel it in moments of dissatisfaction, when the present moment seems lacking and your mind immediately begins to imagine something better. This inner restlessness is the seeker. When you see it, you take a step back from it. You are no longer unconsciously driven by its impulses. The search ends not because you have found what you were looking for, but because the one who was searching is no longer believed to be you. Once you see the seeker, it cannot operate in the same mechanical way it used to. Begin to realize that the seeker exists only when you are lost in thought, lost in projection, lost in the idea that life is elsewhere. The moment you are present, fully here, the seeker disappears. Presence and seeking cannot coexist. When you are present, there is no movement toward the future, no tension toward a better version of yourself. There is only clarity, only awareness, only the simplicity of this moment. The seeker thrives on comparison. It tells you that others have something you don't, that you must catch up, that you must improve, that you must become someone more impressive or more successful. But when you see the seeker, you also see how arbitrary and conditioned these comparisons are. You will recognize that they have been implanted in you by society, by upbringing, by a world obsessed with achievement. The moment you witness this comparison, instead of believing it, the seeker weakens. Its power comes from your unquestioned identification. Once questioned, it loses its authority. Even spiritual searching is part of the seeker's game. Many people begin the inner journey thinking they are trying to find peace, enlightenment, or truth. But very often this too becomes another chase. The seeker puts on sacred clothing and continues its restless movement in subtler ways. It becomes attached to practices, methods, teachers, ideas of awakening. It creates new goals, new expectations, new images of what it means to be spiritual. But the essence remains the same, a movement away from the present into a future fantasy. When you see this spiritual seeker, you are no longer trapped in it. You begin to understand that true awakening is not about adding something new to yourself, but seeing through the illusion that you were ever incomplete. What remains when the seeker is seen is a quiet spaciousness. This spaciousness is not the result of effort, it is the result of awareness. When you no longer chase, you naturally fall into the depth of your own being. The search ends because the distance you imagine between yourself and truth disappears. It was never real to begin with. The truth was always here, always within, always accessible. It was the seeker that created the illusion of distance. By seeing the seeker, you reclaim the immediacy of your own presence. You realize that you were never required to journey outward. You only needed to look inward with a clarity that asks for nothing and seeks nothing. Stillness reveals what effort hides, because silence has a way of uncovering truths that noise can only complicate. Most people live in a constant state of effort to achieve, effort to prove themselves, effort to fix what they believe is wrong, effort to secure a future that feels safe. This endless striving creates a subtle agitation, a buzzing beneath the surface of life. It keeps the mind occupied, constantly analyzing, predicting, judging, and controlling. In this state of inner activity, even the simplest truths become invisible because effort acts like a fog that covers your natural clarity. The more you push, the more the fog thickens and the less you see. Stillness is not the absence of movement in the world around you. It is the absence of noise within you. When you become still, you are no longer chasing, fighting, or resisting. You're simply allowing things to be as they are. In that allowing, something shifts. The mind loosens its grip, and the world begins to appear as if it has been washed clean. You start to notice the space between thoughts, the calm behind emotions, the awareness beneath every experience. In stillness, things reveal themselves not because you hunt for them, but because you stop interfering. Effort is rooted in a belief that you are the one responsible for controlling everything. The mind assumes it must push, adjust, correct, and manipulate to create the life you want. This constant pressure keeps you trapped in your own ideas of how things should be. But life has a rhythm of its own, a deeper intelligence that cannot be accessed through force. When you are always trying to make things happen, you end up blocking the very flow that would naturally guide you. Effort narrows your vision, stillness expands it. In stillness, awareness sharpens. You begin to see your thoughts without being pulled into them. You begin to feel emotions without being swallowed by their intensity. What was previously overwhelming becomes simple because the space around it has grown. WN effort focuses on the problem. Stillness allows the solution to arise. Effort operates from fear and urgency. Stillness arises from trust. And trust opens a door to a kind of understanding that cannot be reached through mental struggle. When you are quiet, you start noticing how much unnecessary effort you normally apply to life. You observe how you tighten around expectations, how you strain to control outcomes, how you push yourself toward goals that may not even be truly yours. Stillness shows you the subtle patterns that effort keeps hidden. It reveals the motivations behind your actions, the insecurities behind your ambitions, the fears that drive your choices. Effort hides these truths because effort is always looking outward. Stillness reveals them because stillness turns your attention inward. In stillness, you also begin to perceive the natural order of things. You see that life unfolds in cycles and rhythms that are bigger than your personal desires. Flowers do not bloom through effort. Rivers do not flow by force. The sun does not rise because it is trying to rise. There is a natural ease in existence, a harmony that effort disrupts. When you align with that ease, when you relax into the present, you feel a quiet intelligence guiding you. You make choices from clarity rather than anxiety. You act from intuition rather than compulsion. You flow instead of forcing. This does not mean that action disappears. Stillness is not passivity, it is the source of the most powerful action. When the mind is silent and the heart is calm, the actions that arise are precise, graceful, and effective. They come from a deeper knowing, not from the panic of I must do something. Effort often leads to exhaustion because it is fueled by tension. Action born from stillness feels natural and requires far less energy. It is not driven by the desire to escape something or to attain something. It arises from the simple recognition of what needs to be done in the moment. Stillness also reveals the truth of who you are beyond your roles, goals, and identities. When you are always striving, you become entangled in the version of yourself that the world expects you to be. You try to fit into a mold, to meet standards, to satisfy ideals. But when you are still, even for a few breaths, the layers begin to fall away. You feel a presence within you that is untouched by your accomplishments or failures, a presence that does not depend on external validation, a presence that is stable, clear, and peaceful. This presence is your true self, and it becomes visible only when effort relaxes. In stillness, you begin to understand that life is not something you have to conquer, it is something you have to listen to. And listening requires quiet. It requires space. It requires the courage to stop running and simply be. Effort hides the truth because it makes you look everywhere except within. Stillness reveals the truth because it brings you back to yourself. Freedom begins with inner acceptance, because until you accept yourself as you are, you remain trapped in an invisible cage made of resistance and self-rejection. Most people believe that freedom is something external. Freedom from obligations, freedom from limitations, freedom from circumstances. But the deepest, most transformative freedom has nothing to do with the outside world. It begins the moment you stop fighting yourself. It begins when you look at your thoughts, your emotions, your imperfections, your desires, and your contradictions, without trying to push them away or bury them under layers of pretend. Edge strength. Acceptance is not resignation, it is the acknowledgement of reality as it is, within you and around you. Inner acceptance is difficult because we are conditioned to constantly improve, change, and correct ourselves. We are taught to judge our emotions as good or bad, acceptable or unacceptable. Anger must be hidden, sadness must be concealed, vulnerability must be suppressed, and flaws must be masked behind a smile. This continuous struggle to appear perfect becomes a lifelong battle with your own nature. The more you resist parts of yourself, the more power those parts gain. Repressed emotions do not disappear, they return in deeper, more complicated forms. Rejected aspects of your personality do not dissolve, they grow in the shadows. Acceptance dissolves them because acceptance brings them into the light. To accept yourself is to stop running from your own reflection. It means standing face to face with everything you are, your strengths and your weaknesses, your brilliance and your insecurities, your joy and your pain. It is an act of honesty, and honesty creates space. When you accept your inner world without judgment, you stop wasting energy on hiding, pretending, or fighting. That energy becomes available for clarity, creativity, and genuine transformation. Freedom is not found in denying your truth, but in embracing it. Acceptance makes you whole. Internal conflict fragments you, dividing you into parts that you approve of and parts you try to eliminate. This division creates a sense of inner tension, a feeling that something is wrong or incomplete. But when you accept every part of yourself, even the parts you do not yet understand, you become unified again. A unified person is grounded, present, and at ease. They do not carry the burden of self-concealment. Their energy is not split between who they are and who they are trying to be. Wholeness, I. Strength, and strength, freedom. Inner acceptance also changes the way you relate to the world. When you are harsh with yourself, you become harsh with others. When you judge yourself, you inevitably judge those around you. When you hide your flaws, you expect others to hide theirs. But when you accept yourself, you naturally become more compassionate, more understanding, and more open. You no longer demand perfection from anyone, including yourself. Life becomes softer, relationships become easier, and your presence becomes a refuge for people, not a battlefield. This shift itself is a form of freedom. Freedom from the constant pressure to compare, compete, and defend. Acceptance does not mean you stop growing or evolving. It means growth arises from love rather than fear. When change comes from fear, it is superficial, unstable, and exhausting. You push yourself because you believe you are not enough. But when change arises from acceptance, it is organic, sustainable, and joyful. You grow because you want to expand, not because you feel incomplete. You evolve because it is natural, not because it is necessary for your worth. This is the difference between forced transformation and authentic evolution. Through acceptance, you begin to notice the deeper layers of your being. You see that beneath your fears and insecurities lies a quiet strength. Beneath your confusion lies clarity. Beneath your anxieties lies a calm presence that has been with you since the beginning. But you cannot reach these deeper layers through rejection. You reach them by allowing everything to be seen. Acceptance opens a doorway inward, and through that doorway you rediscover the parts of yourself that were always whole, always grounded, always peaceful. Inner acceptance also dissolves the fear of failure. When you are no longer judging yourself, you are no longer afraid to make mistakes. You can take risks, try new things, speak your truth, and live authentically, because you are no longer measuring every action against an imaginary standard of perfection. This is profound freedom, the freedom to live without the constant fear of being judged, criticized, or misunderstood. When you accept yourself, the opinions of others lose their power. You no longer seek approval because you no longer feel incomplete. Ultimately, inner acceptance brings you home to yourself. The moment you embrace your inner world as it is without needing it to be different, you feel a spaciousness inside you. This spaciousness is freedom. It is the freedom to breathe, to be, to exist without apology. It is the freedom that arises not from changing who you are, but from finally allowing yourself to be who you are. To say that you are the destination you chase is to turn your entire understanding of seeking, ambition, and fulfillment inside out. From childhood, you are taught to look outward for meaning, toward achievements, relationships, recognition, or some future moment when everything will finally fall into place. You grow up believing that your happiness lies out there, somewhere beyond the horizon of your current life. This belief becomes a driving force, an invisible engine pushing you from one goal to another, from one ambition to the next. But the more you chase, the more distant the destination seems. It always stays a few steps ahead, always promising fulfillment, but never quite delivering it. The truth is simple yet difficult to grasp. The destination you are pursuing is not a place, not a moment, not an accomplishment. It is the deeper, quieter presence within you that has been there all along. Chasing something external gives you the illusion of progress. You feel like you are moving, striving, accomplishing. But movement is not the same as arrival. You may reach your goals, but you never reach yourself through them. You may gain success, but you do not gain inner peace. The journey outward can bring you experiences, but it cannot bring you home. Home is inside, and until you turn inward, no amount of external pursuit will satisfy the longing that lives in the core of your being. The longing is not for something new, it is for a deeper connection with your own essence. When you believe the destination is outside of you, life becomes a constant race. You feel pressured to be more, do more, acquire more. Even in moments of achievement, the satisfaction is temporary. The mind quickly moves the finish line, creating new goals, new dreams, new reasons to postpone contentment. This endless postponement is the nature of seeking. The seeker within you thrives on the promise of a better future, always suggesting that fulfillment is one step away, just beyond your current accomplishment. But the moment you achieve what you were chasing, the seeker immediately redirects your attention somewhere else. It never allows you to rest, because rest would mean the end of its identity. To realize that you are the destination is to recognize what you are truly seeking is yourself, your own presence, your own wholeness, your own awareness. When you turn inward and become still, even for a moment, you feel a glimpse of this inner destination. It appears as a sense of peace that does not depend on circumstances, a quiet joy that arises without reason, a clarity that needs no external validation. These are signs that you have touched the truth. The destination is your true self, and it cannot be reached through external striving because you are already it. You do not travel to it, you awaken to it. The external world is constantly changing. Circumstances shift, relationships evolve, achievements fade, possessions lose their charm. If your sense of fulfillment depends on these changing things, then your happiness will always be unstable. But the destination within you is unchanging. It is the awareness that watches these changes without being touched by them. It is the silent presence beneath every thought, every emotion, every experience. When you rest in this presence, you feel complete. Not because everything in life is perfect, but because your inner grounding does not depend on perfection. Seeing yourself as the destination also transforms the way you relate to your ambitions. It does not mean you stop dreaming or stop creating. It means your actions arise from fullness, not from lack. You no longer chase goals in the hope that they will fill a void. You pursue them because they express your inner joy, your curiosity, your creativity. The journey becomes play rather than struggle. You participate in the world without losing yourself in it. You act without clinging to outcomes. You enjoy success without being enslaved by it. And you face challenges without feeling diminished. When you recognize that you are the destination, impatience disappears. You no longer feel the urgency to rush through life. You become grounded in the present moment because you understand that the present is where you exist most authentically. You stop postponing your happiness until things change. Instead, you begin to appreciate the richness of each moment, even the ordinary ones, because you see that every moment is an expression of the same awareness that you are seeking. The destination is not far away. It is here, always here, available whenever you stop running. This realization also dissolves the fear of failure. When the destination is within you, failure loses its grip because it cannot touch the core of who you are. Failures become learning experiences, not identity wounds. You no longer measure your worth by external results. You understand that nothing you achieve can add to your inner completeness, and nothing you lose can take away from it. This freedom allows you to live boldly, experiment freely, and explore life without the heavy burden of proving yourself. Ultimately, knowing that you are the destination changes your entire relationship with life. It becomes less of a chase and more of a discovery, less of a struggle and more of an unfolding. You stop running towards something imagined and start awakening to something real. You return to yourself, not as an idea, but as a living experience. And in that return, you find the peace, the clarity, and the fulfillment you were searching for all along. Truth appears when the mind disappears, because the mind, in its constant activity, becomes a veil that covers reality rather than a window that reveals it. Most people assume that the mind is the primary tool for understanding life, but the mind is not designed for truth. It is designed for survival, comparison, calculation, and projection. It analyzes, categorizes, and interprets, but it does not see. Seeing requires a different quality, a silence that the mind cannot offer. When the mind is noisy, truth is distorted by opinions, beliefs, fears, memories, and expectations. When the mind becomes quiet, truth reveals itself effortlessly, just as the reflection of the moon appears perfectly on the surface of a still lake. The mind lives in movement. It jumps from thought to thought, clinging to stories and fears, creating scenarios, rehearsing outcomes, and replaying past events. This movement creates a thick layer between you and the present moment. You are not experiencing life directly, you are experiencing your mind's commentary about life. The commentary becomes so loud that you mistake it for reality. Truth becomes something distant, abstract, or philosophical. Because you rarely experience the world without the mind's interference. When the mind disappears, even for a moment, you experience life as it is, fresh, immediate, and unfiltered. The disappearance of the mind does not mean the destruction of thought. It means the cessation of compulsive thought. Thoughts may still arise, but they arise in a background of spacious awareness rather than in a restless storm. When the mind quiets, thoughts lose their stickiness. They come and go, but they do not carry you away. In this state, the truth of each moment, its simplicity, its beauty, its aliveness becomes visible. Truth is not hidden, it is simply obscured by excess thinking. When thinking pauses even briefly, the clarity you have been seeking is suddenly present. People often believe that truth must be searched for, achieved through effort, or attained through complex spiritual practices. But truth is not something you acquire, it is something you uncover. It is already here beneath the noise. The mind's disappearance is not an achievement, but a release, a letting go of the incessant need to control, interpret, and define everything. When the mind stops trying to grasp truth reveals itself naturally. It is like trying to see the stars during the day. They are always there, but the light of the sun hides them. When the sun sets, the stars appear. When the mind settles, truth shines. Truth also appears when the mind disappears, because the mind is rooted in duality. It sees everything in terms of opposites, good and bad, success and failure, right and wrong, gain and loss. These divisions create constant conflict within you. They make you judge your experiences rather than understand them. They make you resist certain emotions rather than feel them. They make you chase certain desires while suppressing others. Truth is not found in duality. Truth is found in the stillness that exists before the mind divides the world. When the mind is silent, the sense of separation dissolves. You feel connected to life in a way that cannot be explained, but can be deeply felt. Moments of deep presence offer glimpses of this truth. When you watch a sunset and become so absorbed that thinking stops, you experience truth. When you are moved by music to the point of timeless silence, you experience truth. When you sit in meditation and the mind softens into quiet awareness, truth becomes tangible. These experiences feel sacred, not because something extraordinary is happening, but because for a moment the mind is absent and reality is allowed to be fully seen. The mind thrives on complexity, while truth is profoundly simple. The mind creates narratives and identities, but truth exists before any identity is formed. The mind insists on certainty, but truth reveals itself only when you let go of the need to know. The mind wants to control, but truth requires surrender. When the mind disappears even briefly, you realize that truth is not a concept. It is an experience. It is the experience of being present, spacious, and aware without trying to manipulate anything. Each disappearance of the mind also dissolves fear. Most fears are creations of thought. Imagine future scenarios, memories of past pain, or interpretations of the present. When the mind is silent, fear loses its foundation. What remains is a quiet confidence, a natural courage that comes from being rooted in the present. Truth appears most clearly when you are not afraid to face yourself. And fear fades when the mind no longer fuels it with stories. In the absence of the mind, you also encounter a sense of inner peace that does not depend on external conditions. This peace is not something you create, it is something you discover. It exists beneath the turbulence of the mind, like calm waters beneath waves. When thoughts subside, this peace becomes evident. It is not passive, it is vibrant, alive, and deeply grounding. In this peace, truth is not something separate from you. Truth is your very nature. Ultimately, truth appears when the mind disappears, because truth is not something the mind can grasp. It is what remains when the grasping stops. It is the silent clarity that has always been there, waiting beneath the noise, waiting to be seen the moment the seeker steps aside. Nothing is lost, only forgotten, because the deepest truths of your being are not things you gain through learning, effort, or experience. They are part of you from the very beginning. You come into the world whole, aware, present, and connected. But as life unfolds, you begin to accumulate layers that cover this natural state. These layers are formed by conditioning, expectations, fears, disappointments, and the countless impressions left by the world around you. Over time, you start to believe that something essential is missing, that you must search, strive, and struggle to reclaim some lost piece of yourself. But the truth is that nothing essential has ever been taken away from you. What you seek is not lost. It has simply been buried beneath the noise of the mind and the weight of forgotten awareness. Forgetting happens quietly. You do not wake up one day having suddenly lost yourself. It happens gradually as you learn to prioritize the opinions of others over the voice within you. It happens when you substitute external achievements for inner fulfillment, when you trade authenticity for acceptance, when you begin to live more in your thoughts than in your presence. With each small compromise, each moment of fear-driven choice, each instance of emotional suppression, the natural clarity within you becomes less accessible. Not because it disappears, but because your attention is drawn elsewhere. Forgetting is not an absence of truth, it is a misdirection of awareness. Nothing is lost because the core of who you are cannot be destroyed. Your essential nature, your awareness, your presence, your capacity for love, your innate peace is not something fragile. It is not dependent on circumstances. You might feel disconnected from it, but that disconnection is an illusion created by the mind's constant activity. When the mind is loud, the subtle voice of your inner truth becomes overshadowed. The more you identify with your thoughts, emotions, and external identity, the more distant your true self appears. But appearances are not reality. Beneath the layers of confusion, insecurity, and habitual thinking, your true nature remains untouched. The sense of being lost comes not from losing yourself, but from forgetting to look within. Every time you seek fulfillment outside, through relationships, success, recognition, or temporary pleasures, you deepen the forgetfulness. These external experiences can bring moments of joy, but they cannot offer lasting fulfillment because they are temporary by nature. When they fade, as they inevitably do, you are left with the same longing, the same emptiness, the same question, why do I still feel incomplete? The answer lies in remembering that what you seek outside has always existed inside. You feel incomplete because you have forgotten your own completeness. Remembering is not about returning to something in the past. It is about rediscovering something that exists right now. The truth of who you are is always present, waiting to be noticed. When you become still, when you quiet the constant movement of thought, even for a moment, you sense this presence. You feel a subtle peace that does not depend on conditions. You feel a sense of I am that is prior to any identity or story. This is remembering not through effort but through awareness. It is like opening a window in a dark room and discovering that the light has always been outside, waiting for you to let it in. Nothing is lost because every experience, even the painful ones, can lead you back to yourself. Suffering often arises when you live disconnected from your inner truth. But even suffering has a purpose. It acts like a messenger. It tells you that you are moving away from your essence. It invites you to stop, reflect, and return. Pain becomes a doorway to awareness when you listen to it instead of resisting it. In this way, even your darkest moments contribute to your remembering. They remind you that you cannot truly lose yourself because the part of you that suffers is not the real you, it is the part of you that has forgotten. As you begin to remember, life starts to feel different. The world does not change, but your relationship with it does. You become more grounded, more present, more compassionate with yourself and others. You stop searching for validation because you no longer feel the inner void that comes from forgetting your own worth. You act with clarity rather than confusion, with calm rather than fear. Remembering restores your inner stability, your natural wisdom, your authentic joy. These qualities were not gained, they were uncovered. The journey of remembering is not a straight line. Some days you feel deeply connected to yourself, other days the old patterns return and you feel lost again. But even this oscillation is part of the process. Each moment of awareness, no matter how small, weakens the forgetfulness. Each time you return to your breath, your presence, your inner sense of I am, you strengthen the remembering. What matters is not perfection, but attention. The more you look within, the more you rediscover the truth that has always been there. In the end, nothing about you needs to be found, fixed, or created. What you are seeking is not somewhere else waiting to be attained. It is right here waiting to be remembered. Nothing is lost, only forgotten.